Hi, I'm Gary Groesbeck.
Hi, I'm Donna Bach, and we're coming to you from our location here in Northern California near this place called Yosemite. And we live up here in the mountains, and we're about ready to share with you about some of our most precious gifts, our brains, our bodies, our lives, and how we can optimize them with all of the ways that we are coming to France again for the fifth time this year in May. And we're looking forward to getting to see some of you there.
So this time we're going to be talking about Neuro Alchemy, neurofeedback and brainwaves, and how to optimize those brainwaves for peak experiences and high performance and flow states. So this is kind of an introductory keynote webinar. And the brainwaves we're going to be talking about have different types, and we'll explain that in more detail. Now, shall I just start out with an explanation here, or do you have a question that?
The main question is, everyone wants to know, what is a flow state and what is an awakened mind and what is neuroalchemy?
Okay, well, that's a big question. So let's talk about brains and brain waves in general to begin with, and then I think we can narrow it down to what we want to talk about in terms of flow states. Now, one of the things that is coming out of the research in the last year, even 2 years at the most, is something called brain entropy. And this is changing the way we look at how the brain functions and how different meditations and different activities affect the brain. So I'm going to make an analogy. Hopefully I'm not going to strain it too much, but I want you to think of the state that you're in right now. You're in a waking state. Okay, that's one particular kind of state, is what we call a normal waking state, hopefully your normal waking state. And we also have other states such as sleep and dreaming. Those are other states that we have. Entropy is saying, brain entropy anyway, there's a meaning in terms of physics, but this is slightly different than what's meant by physics. In brain entropy, what it means is how many states we have access to. So I can go into a waking state, I can go into a sleeping state or a dreaming state or a non-dreaming state, and those are just normal access states for me. Now, if I want to increase that entropy, if I want to increase the number of states I'm going to go into, think about this in terms of locations. Let's say you live right now in the waking brain state, and that might be like living in Paris. So you're living in Paris, and you can go to Lyon. And if you go back and forth from a waking state to a dreaming state, it's sort of like going from Paris to Lyon and back and forth. Now, entropy says that we have more states possible, so that we can go not only from Paris to Lyon, but we can take the train over to Burgundy or Marseille or some other area such as Vienna or Barcelona, so that we can just kind of travel around in different locations. And by doing that, we are developing increased entropy, or we're giving more optimization or more access to different states of consciousness, different states of awareness. So what we want to do with, when we're talking about what we're teaching, is that we are actually increasing the amount or possibility of entropy in your brain, so that your mind can go to different states, different locations, different cities, so to speak, at will. And when we have a particular type of meditation, let's talk about meditation for just a moment, because this is very common. Everybody wants to know about meditation. The thing is we are not teaching another system of meditation. What we're doing is teaching you how to travel at will from Paris to Lyon to Burgundy to Barcelona and back again by using different brain waves, your energy in the brain. We'll talk about the brain waves in a moment. So understand that we are not teaching meditation. but we are teaching the underlying framework that allows you to go into the particular states that you want to go into. And that might be improved meditation if you're a meditator, or it could be going into flow states, or it could be going into peak experience states. So we have specific understandings of what flow means. And I think Donna has some comments to make about what a flow state is, sort of the characteristics of a flow state. And we've talked about that in one of the webinars, earlier webinars, that hopefully you've had access to. It's already been translated into French, and that discusses more about the flow states. So I hope that clarifies in some way what it is that we're doing. We're increasing brain entropy. Now, recent research has shown that as you increase the brain entropy, you actually increase your intelligence. They've found a very close correlation between one's intellect and the ability to go into different states or have increased brain entropy. They've also found that meditations in themselves increase brain entropy. So the brain wave patterns that we're talking about are, as they're used, will help to increase the number of locations you can go to in your day-to-day experience.
So what we talk about when we are understanding this awakening of the mind is that the different types of brainwaves that are in the correct ratio, the right amplitude, the amount of energy being expanded out, and all of the sequencing of the left and right hemisphere working together in good coherence and harmony, that getting into the specific brainwave state that is measurable and that we can coach you and train you and guide you into is the way that you can access those really high performance optimal brainwave states that make you feel like this peak flow state, which is the one that is more creative, up to 500% more creative. You can get 5 times more done. You can be more efficient. And all of these tracks Gary is talking about are more railroad tracks going everywhere you want to go in the instant that you want to do it, that everything is more flexible and more adaptable, and nothing can derail you. Even if somebody comes along and does something that you might have been upset by in the past, you are on your track and you stay at peace no matter what happens. And when you're in that flow state, a lot of times you don't even notice the passage of time. You're not self-conscious anymore. You have a feeling of being somewhere else. You don't even notice the noise around you. And it's really a place that can be very blissful and joyful, like a bubbling spring of joy just coming up and staying in that state for a very long, prolonged period of time. So we have the ability, with hooking up your brain and also getting your heart to be in the right coherence, to help you go there at will when you want to be in this peak performance state, and to stay there as long as you like, and all the tools and mechanisms to feel inside yourself how to get there with the exercises that you will learn in our training that we give.
I think a lot of you have already experienced flow states. I mean, it's not uncommon. It can be, a small flow state. You have a little sense of yourself not being involved in anything. Your thoughts kind of shutting down. Everything seems kind of easy and flowy. I mean, they use the word flow because it feels flowy. You're just kind of doing things at ease without effort. Now, peak experiences incorporate or have some of that flow experience to it, but they generally involve more a sense of awe and wonder, and also a feeling of joy or happiness, a greater sense of oneness with nature around you. And so there's a relationship between flow states and peak states. And gradually, as we're talking about locations, where you're living, let's say you normally live in Paris, which is your daytime normal waking state. And at nighttime, you go over to some other area of Paris where they have a nice nightlife. And so you travel back and forth in those areas, and you're pretty much permanently in a location of where you exist. And sometimes you take the train to Lyon and you visit there, you have a different kind of experience, and you come back again to your normal state. Now, there are identified approximately 32 different non-ordinary, what are called non-ordinary states that we can all go to if we have the proper understanding of how the brain works and what's happening with the various brain rhythms. So as we decrease the amount of beta and we increase alpha and we increase theta, we can begin to drop down into other states and also increasing the delta. And so as we go through the workshop, as we talk to you and try to guide you as best we can to these different frequencies, into an alpha state, into a theta state, into a delta state, and allow you, and this is also into gamma, which is sort of that very high frequency, so that we are allowing you or giving you the flexibility to go to many different places in creativity and flow, in optimal performance. So this will improve, quite a number of things in your life.
The reason we call what we do a Neuro Alchemy training is because alchemy represents a mixture of all the different modalities that provide the results in changing your neurochemistry, optimal performance and balance, getting everything to work together, and to understand where you are at any given time so that you can have a feeling inside that tells you, yes, I am in the state I want to be right now. And we have some lessons that are already ready to be seen online that are translated already, which give the basis, the history. It tells about each one of the different brainwaves, gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And it explains what each one is for, and you will be able to access that lesson, which will give you more of the underlying history and introduction to what it is we are going to be presenting when we are in Paris.
Now, we've had questions about meditations and how that relates to our brainwaves. And again, we need to go back to this idea of locations. Different types of meditations activate different areas of the brain. And over the years, we've kind of looked at, through fMRIs and EEGs and so on, looked at what areas of the brain become active when people start to meditate. So let's say you're doing a concentrated meditation, the frontal lobes will light up and some of the occipital lobe will light up and maybe some of the other areas of the brain will light up. But each area of the brain responds to what intention you have. So if you want to focus your attention on one thing, it develops certain areas of the brain. So it activates and deactivates different areas of the brain. And this is why when you go through traditional meditation training, that you get training not only in mindfulness, but also in concentrated meditations, mantra meditations, such as chanting, and also compassion meditations, sometimes Kundalini energy meditations. So there's a mixture of these meditations because they all affect the brain in different ways. However, what we have begun to realize in the last year or so is that the important thing is not so much what areas of the brain are being turned on and turned off, but the connections between them. So that as you begin to meditate, it actually begins to increase the entropy of the particular areas of the brain that are being activated or deactivated and allowing you to move more easily between them. So this is a different way of looking at the functions of meditation. And what's happening is that the brain waves themselves are the guiding influence on what areas are being activated or deactivated and the type of experience that you're having. So maybe I'll go into a slightly different analogy here. Some of you are familiar with the Schumann resonance. If you're not, the Schumann resonance is a frequency pattern that surrounds the entire Earth. So if you think of the Earth as a big globe, and surrounding that is a shell, which we call the ionosphere, and the electrical charge between the two is a little bit different. So you have a positive and negative charge between the two, so you get a lot of lightning. And you get lightning all over the surface of the Earth. But the Schumann resonancy, no matter where you go, is a particular frequency of electrical activity. And that is approximately at the theta alpha edge of the brain. And there are harmonic resonance with that also. So you're looking at two things that we're talking about here. One is the awakened mind pattern, which is the overall pattern, sort of like the Schumann resonance, that surrounds the entire brain, the entire global brain. But within the brain, there's all this electrical activity going on that has, on the Earth, it's complete, almost chaos in terms of where the electrical activity is going to be. But you have an increase in entropy. So you have kind of a guiding overall metastable pattern. And then underneath that, you have an increase in the entropy or the amount of electrical activity that's going on. So what we're seeing with meditations is the same thing. We're seeing that the awakened mind pattern and some of the other patterns we call evolved mind patterns act as sort of metastable guiding patterns. And the local areas in meditation are increasing the entropy or the amount of networks that you can go to, the different locations you can go to in the brain. So the awakened mind pattern itself actually kind of mirrors that Schumann resonance, so that the alpha that comes out, the alpha theta that comes out is approximately at that dominant resonance. And then you have some little beta above that, and some gamma above that, and some theta below that, so that you actually have the awakened mind pattern mirroring this Schumann resonance.
And so the question was asked, is this the same as musical notes in a symphony? And the answer is yes, if the symphony is being played by the Earth, and the Earth is creating the frequencies that are the ones that are similar to what we have in the brain when we are in that specific ratio of a smaller amount of beta, which is at the top of the brain wave. It's the one that's the conscious mind, and a larger amount of alpha, which is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious and the subconscious. So that alpha is the creative zone of all of our senses, hearing and seeing and feeling in our body. And those are the senses that help create more alpha. And then the next one down is the theta. And this theta is the one that gets really large, especially in children. And when children are young, they're constantly in that zone of playing and creating, just fantasizing and being in sort of a little world of their own. And then underneath that is the lowest one is delta. And when we go into what we have been using as our model, which has been around for about 50 years now, which was described originally by the creator of our mind mirror, the one that we use to measure your brainwaves when we have you hooked up. That awakened mind pattern is like a gateway into optimal peak flow states. And that's the reason why, even though it is an old term used for thousands of years, the awakening of the mind is something ancient Tibetans and meditators have used forever. It's now been adapted to this modern technology of being able to measure what your brain is doing and using correct coherence so that your heart is in coherence, your breathing is slowed down to about 6 times per minute, and it's using your whole breath. All of the different techniques that are modulating those internal mechanisms and changing your neurochemistry are what we're now calling neuro alchemy. And they're neuroplasticity exercises that you can do easily after you learn them yourselves at home in order to just stay in the locations that you choose to be in for any given performance that you would like to just be more effective and more efficient and more responsible in your life.
I think we've also had a question about therapeutic aspects of the awakened mind. And first of all, I have to say that we do not diagnose or prescribe treatment. We're educational. And if you feel that you have some sort of underlying emotional issue that you need help with, then we strongly suggest that you see a counselor or someone trained in that area to take care of you. Another thing about, though we're not teaching meditation, we will be taking you down into alpha theta states, which begin to release some of the emotional content. As our teacher Anna used to say, everybody's got stuff down there. And so as you begin to relax and as you begin to drop down into these deeper states of awareness, as deeper states of alpha theta, some of that material begins to come up. And this is why we use tapping. And I'm assuming that most of the people that are going to be in this particular workshop will have gone through a tapping workshop and will have worked with Dawson or other people. And so the tapping techniques are like stress management. They allow you to deal with some of the emotional content that may be coming up. And usually that's enough to take care of sort of the first things that come up. And the thing is our mind and our unconscious will only begin to give us what we're ready to deal with, usually. And so I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't stress about the fact that you might be going into an alpha theta state. Usually what happens in an alpha theta state is you have some very nice swirly pictures and images, and we will be guiding you into areas that are quite safe and quite pleasant and very creative, so that the chances, of you developing any reaction, emotional reaction, are minimized.
And for those of you in this audience who are already very passionate about neurofeedback and already know a lot about neurofeedback, you'll be interested in knowing how all of this fits together when, instead of having the clinical type of neurofeedback where you go to a therapy session and they hook up your brain and then you're attached to some kind of a computerized program in order to have that instant feedback, this program that we are going to be giving the monitoring is going to be so that you can learn what things feel like inside when we are measuring your brain waves. And that neuroplasticity that is happening is something that gives you more of a sense of control, so that you have that tool inside of yourself as self-mastery rather than having it applied on the outside that you're dependent on. The same is true of any of the machines that send frequencies into your brain with either sound or binaural beats or with lights that you wear. There are lots of different companies that sell different types of equipment, and we don't endorse any of those in our training, because what we do is to teach you how to do it yourself, like riding a bicycle. So once you learn how to ride a bicycle when you're a child, nobody ever has to go give you another lesson in how to ride a bicycle from then on for the rest of your life, because you know how to do it, unless there's been an injury or something happened. But usually you remember what it feels like to just be balanced on a bicycle and not even think about that. So what we've learned over the last 20 years of working with the mind mirror and the brainwave training is that now I know when I'm driving my car, what brainwave state is best for driving a car, or how to stay alert and not get sleepy. I know how to modulate those brainwaves to be in the most optimal state for whatever the situation calls for. I'm a holistic health provider, so I know which brainwave state to get into automatically whenever I'm working with a client that needs my healing, and a session that's very carefully customized just for them. So that creativity comes in very useful for even a personal therapy practice that you might have and how you deal with your clients, because you know how to get into the healing brainwaves. The healing brainwaves are often that awakened mind pattern, the flow pattern, or an alpha theta pattern. Especially a lot of healers have a lot of delta at the same time. So you'll be able to feel that, and then you'll be able to use that feeling that you have a key that you can key right back in when you need it.
This is used by either consciously or unconsciously by creative people, writers, artists, musicians. In fact, there was a study done at the London College of Music, I think it's London College of Music, and King's College. I'm not very up on my colleges in England, but it was a fairly good study, and it's been a number of years ago. And they took graduate students who were playing violin, and they were all reasonably good, technically good, and they taught one group how to get into an alpha theta state for about, I think, 6 weeks, and the other group simply practiced as usual. And then later they had independent judges listen to them to see what had happened. And they found that the students who had practiced the alpha theta states had made almost a year's progress in their ability to interpret the music. And that shows an increase in creativity, and that's again goes back to that idea of increasing entropy. You have more pathways, you have more ability to express the emotion that you want through your music. Now, if you're a writer and you get into, say, a writer's block, which is quite often, as you start trying to think too much about things, you get into too much beta. Your mind is constantly going, and you're struggling with all of the ideas that you might have had. What you need to do then is to relax and to drop down into an alpha theta state, because theta contains all that creativity, and you need to know how to allow that idea to come back up into your mind. How often have you been struggling with a problem at work, or creative problem, or whatever's going on in your life, and you lie down, just you've thought and thought and thought about it, can't seem to come to any solution, and then you lie down and you start to fall asleep, and just before you fall asleep, all of a sudden you sit up and you go, oh, I've got it, because you've dropped down into that alpha theta state. And this is what we're going to be able to teach you, is how to grasp, let's say, go into that state at will, whatever you want, to get a hold of whatever that creative input may be. Now, there's been some questions about using this in sports. How can you use this in sports? There's actually a fellow who's a professional golf or tennis player, though this does work for golf, and it works for quite a number of other sports that he's used it for. But he initially started out with tennis, and he discovered, he, let's say, was working and playing and practicing and not being able to really, get where he wanted to go in playing tennis. And then suddenly he slipped into this state of flow. He wasn't quite sure how he got there, but it's all of a sudden everything was so easy, he couldn't miss a ball. It came over that net, he put them right where he wanted them to be. Everything was effortless. And gradually over time, he began to realize what he did was that he opened up his peripheral vision and his ability to see. Now, normally he'd been taught, and he was a coach, a tennis coach, he'd been taught that you keep your eye on the ball. But he realized that he wasn't keeping his eye on the ball. He was actually creating a window in front of him about an arm's length away from him, and that he was paying attention to that field. And whenever the ball would come at it, as soon as it would come into that field, he would automatically swing at it. And his body knew exactly what he was supposed to do. And he discovered that this works also for baseball players. Think about that ball coming at you at 90 miles an hour. You don't have time to think about what's happening if you happen to hit that ball. Also, the same thing in martial arts. You don't pay attention exactly to what the other person is doing. You read their movements, and you have that kind of window in front of you where they begin to swing, and you automatically are there without thinking about it. So there's ways of getting into flow, doing these different exercises. And what is happening is that your brain is actually dropping down into a centralization, and is dropping down into an open alpha state. And that alpha state is just allowing you to respond almost instantaneously to what's coming at you. So there's different ways of using this, whether it's sports or creativity, or actually in therapy as well. And I think therapists are very interested in this aspect of it, is that because much of the emotional content that you want to deal with as a therapist resides in that theta state, is that you increase the theta state within the individual while maintaining the alpha bridge that allows that information to come into consciousness with a little bit of beta, and sometimes with increased gamma as well. And the emotional content comes up, and in a process that allows the person to deal with it within a therapeutic context more easily.
And that's where intuition comes in, because I have that happen to me when I'm a therapist and working with my clients. The intuition, when you have that openness and that oneness where you feel connected to everything, and you have that entrainment that connects you to your client or your patient, if you're a doctor or a therapist, that is what makes it possible to access your intuition and to know exactly what to do next for that person for their best and highest good.
So were there any other questions that...
We've read through all the questions, and I think that we've covered all of the answers to them without actually saying them word for word what the questions were. But hopefully you got all of the answers for those who were able to watch this. And what we're looking forward to in May is that we will be in Paris at the same time and with the same conference as Dawson Church is presenting. We will also be doing a presentation from the stage, and we'll be giving out a whole new updated version of what we have done in past years, using the newest research and neuroplasticity and all of the different kinds of practices that we have now upgraded our training to. We'll be doing that from stage. We'll also be monitoring some of Dawson Church when he does his presentation with certain meditations that he likes to have us monitor, so that you can see what's happening in the brain waves when there's an exercise Dawson is leading. We'll be helping him and assisting him in that manner. And then right afterwards, the day after, which is on Monday, we have the one-day event. And then there's an option of training practitioners who would like to use the same equipment that we use, which is called the Velistis 6, the Mind Mirror Neurofeedback equipment. And that option is available, but we do have a few prerequisites for that. Number one is we're only teaching that class in English. We're not going to have it translated. So you would need to be comfortable with the language of English for the training, and it's 2 days long, and it would be the following 2 days. If we get anyone who is interested, to let us know so we can schedule it within the next few weeks so that we can get our travel plans made. It would be on Tuesday and Wednesday following the weekend of the 10th and 11th. Then after that, we would also ask that anyone who wants to take that training would already have contacted us, and that we would assist you in ordering your own equipment so you have it already. And it's already with you, so we can help train you on how to use it for your clients. And also that you get some pre-training with not only taking your own experiential workshop yourself, but also some reading and some materials that you would need to be more prepared before you take the other training. And the other training is a kind of a higher fee because it's professional, and it's a standardized fee that is for certification purposes. And so for that reason, no matter where you go around the world, to anyone who can train you on how to use the Velistis equipment, it's always the same. And we just have to charge the same as what the standardized amount is?
So this would be the first level of training, the first 2 days. There are 4 levels of training, depending on what you would like to do professionally with the Ballistus and with the mind mirror training and with the neurofeedback. The Ballistus is a complete neurofeedback system. You can use it for many other things other than mind mirror training. It also has biofeedback sensors capability as well. So the first level of training is basically how to use the system and how to read the brain waves, how to monitor them and track them, and what they mean. Beyond that, that's sufficient training, let's say, if you want to use this for your own personal training. Beyond that, there's other levels of training, depending on whether you want to use it therapeutically in an office setting or whether you actually want to begin training large groups as we do. There's different levels of training there.
We will be sending out our contact information and email. So any of you who are interested in that kind of upgraded training for yourselves or for your clients, we would welcome emails. And since it was the prerequisite is that it be all capable of doing it in English, that you would contact us directly and we'll give you the rest of what else is necessary to get that type of training in order to use the Ballistus equipment.
So I think we've just about covered everything here.
So we are looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you when we are in France this year, and we always look forward to coming to France. It's so beautiful. Even though we live in a beautiful place too, there's just nothing like Paris, and also all of your beautiful faces and your lovely big hearts that we love connecting with whenever we're there with you. We're looking forward to lots of big hugs too. Hugs and kisses.
So au revoir, à bientôt.
And we'll see you later.